Indiana Chief Justice Loretta Rush seeks another term. Fewer students complete the FAFSA, plus looking ahead to the Indiana Democratic Convention and more. From the television studios at WFYI, it's Indiana Week in Review for the week ending July 12th, 2024.
Indiana Week in Review is made possible by the supporters of Indiana Public Broadcasting Stations.
This week, Loretta Rush announced she will seek another 5-year term as Chief Justice of the Indiana Supreme Court. Rush became the first woman to serve in the role in 2014. The Chief Justice is chosen by the state's Judicial Nominating Commission from among the 5 justices on the Supreme Court. The commission is primarily made up of 3 citizens appointed by the governor and 3 lawyers appointed by other lawyers. Rush was first named Chief Justice in 2014 after being appointed to the state's High Court 2 years earlier by Governor Mitch Daniels. She is reappointed to the job in 2019 and now seeks a 3rd term. In a letter to judges and judicial branch staff, Rush says she wants to continue working on issues that include the state's attorney shortage, the opioid epidemic, improving court technology, and protecting judicial officers from violent threats. Rush's renomination bid has the support of the other 4 justices. Should Loretta Rush serve another 5-year term as Chief Justice? It's the first question for our Indiana Week in Review panel. Democrat Ann DeLaney, Republican Mike O'Brien, Oseye Boyd, editor-in-chief of Mirror Indy, and Leslie Bonilla Muñiz, reporter for the Indiana Capital Chronicle. I'm Indiana Public Broadcasting State House Bureau Chief Brandon Smith. Ann DeLaney, Rush also faces a retention vote on the ballot this fall. Should she be retained?
Well, I'm delighted. I was afraid she was going to retire, so I think this is a really good move. I think she's led the court in a good direction. I haven't always agreed with their decisions, but I mean, she's been concerned with the fact that in rural areas of the state, there are not enough lawyers to provide the legal services necessary, and she's developed a commission to try to come up with ways to ameliorate that problem, which is a real problem for people. I mean, if they can't find a lawyer when they need one, it's a real difficulty. So I think she's thought outside the box, and she's well regarded, and she's been a wonderful alum of the Maurer School of Law, and so I'm delighted she's running again.
She had talked last fall about the idea of whether or not she was unsure when we talked to her. I think it was in November. She was a little uncertain about whether she'd run for another 5-year term as chief. Did we kind of need another 5 years of her leadership to kind of move us into the next sort of the future of Indiana, which feels like we're at a bit of a turning point?
Yeah, consistency. I thought I was going to have to come up here and defend her, but so Ann surprised me. But no, well, I think to your question, I think that it speaks volumes that the other 4 justices are fully supportive of her being retained and being the continuing to serve as the Chief Justice. I think this was like the reaction to this was. I mean, this says it all. Ann DeLaney is like, no, that's great. It says it all, and the reaction from the attorneys I've spoken to was it was going to the rural areas, creating uniformity from a technology standpoint, county by county, full access to the My Case. To the My Case system is a big deal for not only attorneys, but for nosy neighbors that want to know more about the lawsuits that their neighbors are involved in. But,
and journalists.
And journalists.
There's some overlap sometimes with those things.
The nosy applies.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. So no, I think this is great. It's great for continuity too.
In terms of the retention vote, so this is different from her running for Chief Justice. The Chief Justice is chosen by the Judicial Nominating Commission. I do have to say, to the point that the other justices are supporting her, the way this generally works is the other justices still go in for like the interview when they're choosing the new chief, and it's very funny to see them talk about like, well, obviously I support her, but just in case, here's some stuff about me. And
it's been a little bit more open than that on other occasions.
Yes, but the retention vote is different. The public gets to weigh in on that, and that's for all of the members of the Supreme Court, all of the members of the Court of Appeals on a regular rolling basis. Those haven't become political in Indiana, really, ever. And I don't know, to my memory, that anyone has ever not been retained. But we've seen Supreme Court races across the country get much more political. Do you see things changing at any point in Indiana?
Not in the near future, I don't. Now, 30 years from now, 40 years from now, who knows what could happen. But in the near future, I don't, because we tend to be okay with our system as it is. I do think, though, that we need more transparency when it comes to judges, to what judges are actually doing. Like when we're bringing up the My Case and the rule and the getting more lawyers in rural areas, I feel like the public needs to know that a little bit more so they understand exactly what's going on, so then they can make an informed vote, a decision. Because I do think the things we brought up are very good, but I don't think the general public would know that. I think you just go in there and just vote. Yes, because she's already in there.
That's probably why you retain them, though,
I was just going to say.
She's already in there.
Unless there's a concerted effort with money to defeat somebody, they get retained.
Or a big controversy.
That's why you have that one.
It's going to check yes.
And is that the point? In other places where we've seen these races become more political, it's oftentimes because the public is actually voting on who gets appointed in the first place, right?
Well, and I think the other piece to like why this isn't really that political here, at least for now, is just because, to what you said, like people don't know about it. It's just like a really pretty low information sort of race, and maybe if there was a big effort behind it, then it would be A, more political, and B, probably a little bit more like voted on, because people don't have to vote on every position.
No, they don't.
And that's pretty far down the list, I think, on the ballot too. So that's So by the time you get to that page, sometimes you've forgotten about it completely.
For a few Hoosiers that don't just pick straight party.
Straight ticket voting, that's true. All right, time now for viewer feedback. Each week we post an unscientific online poll question. And this week's question is, should Indiana Supreme Court Chief Justice Loretta Rush serve another 5-year term? A, yes, or B, no. Last week we asked you whether Joe Biden should step aside as the Democratic nominee for president. 58% of you say yes, 42% say no. I'd love to know if more Democrats or Republicans were saying no and yes on that one, but we don't break that out. If you'd like to take part in the poll, go to WFYI.org/IWIR and look for the poll. Well, fewer Indiana high school seniors have completed the federal application for college financial aid this year than state leaders had hoped. From WFYI's education desk, Rachel Fredette reports problems with the federal aid portal likely impacted how many students completed the form.
This past school year, Indiana higher education leaders set a lofty goal to have more than 60% of high school seniors complete the FAFSA, but only about 45% of Indiana seniors completed the form, according to federal data released last month. That's about the same percentage of seniors who completed the form in the last few years. Data will be tracked through September. The FAFSA, or the Free Application for Federal Student Aid form, determines how much financial aid students get from federal and state governments, as well as from higher education institutions. Students and families across the country struggled to complete the FAFSA last school year due to delays and glitches in the rollout of the new version of the application. But Indiana higher education leaders hope that next year will be different. Once the problems are fixed, they expect to see an increase in applications in the future.
Mike O'Brien, state lawmakers have tried to make FAFSA completion more of a priority, too, in schools. They didn't mandate it, but it was certainly encouraged a lot more. Do we chalk up this year of lower-than-hoped numbers to this one-off glitch?
Yeah, they lost 4 months, right? It was normally these go out in October. They went out in January. While the state was trying to, at the exact same time, the state had this new law that was trying to encourage schools to proactively require with an opt-out, that students fill these out. It's worth noting that we were #1 in the country in year over year. So we're down 0.9% year over year. The next closest state was down 4.5% in North Dakota. So, and that's really because of, to brag on a client, InvestEd and the Commission on Higher Education work together to go out. They already have 600 events planned for next year to go school by school, city by city. To promote this, help people with just the literacy part of filling out this form, which is really complicated.
It's very complicated.
My mom still talks about 27 years ago filling out a FAFSA. She remembers it like it was like hard, and so she took the lead in my family on doing that and still talks about it. So it's good. It's certainly not where they want to be, but given that every state was down and we were #1 in the country in terms of how much we slipped, I think it bodes well for how the compliance rate is going to look in 25.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, this is the federal government's problem, and we got to put it on the federal government.
Right. It was terribly done, I think. Not just the 4-month delay, but I think the application itself is so cumbersome that people they're put off by even trying to fill it out, which is not what you want to do. You need to get certain information, certainly. I don't argue with that, but it can't be quite as cumbersome as it is, and it needs, obviously, to be done on schedule because a lot of kids just didn't get it.
Definitely a barrier.
Yeah, absolutely.
We need more College Goes Sundays
Yeah.
for people to fill out that form. I don't know if everyone's aware of College Goes Sunday, and that's when you can go and actually get help to fill the form out. So we need to do more of that.
In terms of what lawmakers have done, you pointed out, they did. It's mandatory, but there's an opt-out, and that was a big debate in the General Assembly about what are we actually going to require of students and that sort of thing. That was a whole fight that happened for a while, and lawmakers generally like to see the results of their work. And here, obviously, not a lot to trumpet, but to the number that Mike just pointed out, is that going to kind of bolster the idea that, we made the right call and it'll get better in the future?
I mean, I think it's definitely an encouraging sign that we didn't drop even close to as much as other states in terms of their completion rate. But I do think that to see the specific impacts of what lawmakers here have passed, they're going to have to wait at least another year.
Yeah. All right. The Gary Community School Corporation has officially shifted from state back to local control. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Kirsten Adair reports the district is no longer financially distressed, but residents still won't be able to vote on their local school board for the foreseeable future.
The district has been under state control since 2017 when it had more than $21 million in operating debt. It was forced to relinquish local control to an emergency manager appointed by the state. The school corporation has maintained a surplus of more than $1 million since 2021. Michael Razor, the state-appointed manager, says Gary has budgeted for the next 5 years and has a considerable cash reserve.
The school district is in some of the best financial shape of districts in the state right now.
A 5-member school board appointed by the Indiana Department of Education, the Gary Common Council, and Gary's mayor have advised the district for the past year. The board will take over in July and appoint Yvonne Stokes as the new superintendent. Razor and his deputy manager will stay on as consultants during the transition.
Oseye Boyd, this was sort of the state's first go in taking over an entire school district because of these financial issues, this in Muncie. Mm-hmm. Is it fair to call this takeover of Gary successful?
I'm going to say yes. I think, though, it depends on who you ask if it's been successful, because enrollment has continued to decline in Gary schools. However, they are now out of being distressed, so that's a good thing. And now I like that Yvonne Stokes is going to be there now. The superintendent from Hamilton Southeastern Schools is now going to be there. So I like that she actually stayed in Indiana versus going someplace else after the controversy she had in Hamilton Southeastern Schools. But I think there's a lot of challenges still ahead. How do you attract those students back to Gary schools so that we don't fall into this distress situation again? Because if there's no enrollment, that's going to actually impact the money that comes into the schools. So I think there's some challenges there, and as well as staffing and getting key staff members.
Not unique to Gary.
Not unique to Gary at all, but I think there's some challenges there. What I have concerns about, though, is when we say local control, but the school board is appointed. So the community doesn't actually have a voice in choosing the board members yet, much as the same as in Muncie, where Ball State is controlling the school board. Well, appoints the school board, I should say, not controlling. That's not the right word. But I think that kind of gives you a less incentive to actually be concerned about what's happening with your local school district.
Yeah, to that end, obviously, again, talking about how lawmakers want to see the results of their work. Now, this goes back a ways, but if lawmakers look at this sort of thing again, do you think they look at what happened in Muncie, look at what happened in Gary, and go, yeah, this worked well?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is, now they've got experience in this tool now, and so I feel like that definitely, if something ever arises with another one of our schools, I think they would probably feel pretty comfortable doing it again. They know how it works and they know how to do it. But I also, to your point about enrollment, I do think that's interesting because they've also shown a willingness to penalize schools with dropping enrollment and reward those schools that are seeing a lot of growth.
To the point about the local school boards are still not being elected by those communities, do you think that's fair at this point?
I think since they're solvent, I don't see any reason why the local community shouldn't have a voice now in selecting those school board members. I mean, I don't want to say suffered through, but they endured being taken over by the state, and it's now working so that they're solvent, and it's time for locals to run their schools again, I think.
And not just solvent, but doing Gary better than most of the schools financially.
Since where they were, though, they probably have a lot of infrastructure that they have to do that has been postponed for years because of the financial problems.
What's the now? I think the Gary mayor still has a role in appointing the school board, so at least there's some a little closer than there is in Muncie.
It's kind of tinkers to Evers to chance.
Yeah, a little bit. But what's the argument at this point for not giving full control back to the people of Muncie, the people of Gary?
I think you ease it back in, right? I mean, how long ago did they take this over? 15 years ago?
I don't think it was that long, but
it's been like a decade.
Yeah, it's been about a decade.
I mean,
it's been about a decade.
Because they created this new system, and the school had to fail on certain metrics.
Right. So many years
times,
in a row. Right.
So many years in a row before the state then had this access to this option to take it over. And of course it's successful. I mean, the one metric was you were I think it was $21 million in debt. And now they're in the positive, which is incredible. Of course, you have to address the issues that like other school districts have to deal with personnel and infrastructure and capital expenses and all of those things. So I think the state keeping an eye on that for some period of time, I think, is appropriate, so it doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
Yeah, but after 15 or 10 or however many years it's been, I think local control is what school is supposed to be about. So it's about time they got a direct voice in who runs the schools.
All right. Indiana Democratic Convention delegates will decide 2 competitive nomination races at the state party convention this weekend, choosing the nominees for lieutenant governor and attorney general. The race for the Democratic lieutenant governor nomination features 4 candidates, spurred in part by unease among some in the party at gubernatorial candidate Jennifer McCormick's pick, conservative Democrat Terry Gooden. Gooden, a former state lawmaker, is expected to win, but he'll face Tammy Dixon Tatum, who failed to get on the ballot for governor this year, Bob Kern, a perennial candidate for many offices, and Cliff Marsiglio, who unsuccessfully ran for mayor of Indianapolis last year. The convention race for Attorney General is more competitive. Destiny Wells and Beth White have both been vying for the nomination for months. Wells, a lieutenant colonel in the Army National Guard who had an unsuccessful bid for Secretary of State in 2022, previously worked in the AG's office. White is a former county clerk and leads the Indiana Coalition to End Sexual Assault and Human Trafficking. Leslie, does it seem like Terry Gooden is headed for a pretty comfortable victory here?
I would say the odds are in his favor, but I mean, one thing to consider is political observers might have thought the same thing about, the Republican.
Julie McGuire.
No, we didn't.
It did seem like there was a lot more buzz heading into the Republican convention that Julie McGuire might be in trouble as opposed to this one, right?
Well, I mean, it's something like when you're in the driver's seat in terms of controlling the governor's office for so long, and the presumptive next governor picks his person. That person doesn't win, that's a much bigger deal than Democrats, trying to come out of the wilderness here. But it's also like, get out of your own way. It's like we do it too, and it's just it's how party politics work. But it's like you really needed you really needed a competition in your LG's race. You need everyone rowing the same direction. You don't need this isn't a time for Democrats to go, let's go mix it up at the convention. No, let's all get on the exact same page and try our best.
There are a lot more candidates running against the gubernatorial nominees pick at the Democratic convention than the Republican one.
Are there?
Is that yeah?
And those are the only 2 in the rowing. So no, I mean the difference is obvious. I mean Beckwith had a large campaign
for a year beforehand.
These 2 are perennial candidates that nobody takes seriously. So Gooden is not going to have any problem at all. And you have to also remember that Jennifer McCormick had the overwhelming Democratic primary vote, whereas Mike Braun only got 40% of the vote.
Yeah,
and there were other people who had spent a lot of money against him who were not happy about his choice. So all of that fed the contest for lieutenant governor on the Republican side, and it's missing on the Democratic side.
A few weeks ago, when Jennifer McCormick announced Terry Gooden as her pick, there was a lot of unease within the party about how conservative his voting record was. He immediately tried to come out and say, those votes were a mistake. I don't believe the same thing. No, he did come out and say, that's true. He came out and said, those votes were a mistake. I feel differently now. And then it seems like he's tried to go out and do the work of talking to people about that. Are you surprised that it looks like 3 weeks later or 4 weeks later, are you surprised that it looks like his path to victory is going to be so easy?
No. No, looking at the competition, no. I don't know what more to say other than.
I want to ask also about the Attorney General's race, where we do expect probably a more competitive contest among the 2 candidates. Does it seem like one of them at this point has the advantage, Leslie?
I mean, from what I've heard, and probably no more than me, but it seems like, Beth White has a lot of support from within the party because she has been doing the work for so long, and maybe people want to reward that. But also, I mean, Destiny has run statewide way more recently. She's got a little bit more statewide name recognition. And she's also a younger face. She's got the story about growing up in, conservative area that maybe helps her appeal to moderate or, moderate Republican Hoosier voters.
Destiny Wells has been running for this office a little longer than Beth White has. Not dramatically longer, but certainly longer. Do you think that ends up helping her with such a small population who's going to be voting on this race?
It definitely could. One of the things I think is at some point there has to be this passing on the baton at some point. There has to be this letting the younger people come up through the ranks and actually gain positions of power. And I feel like that tends to be a problem, especially in the Democratic Party, that we don't see younger people being allowed. It's kind of been a shutting them out of, we want to keep the power from the few people that we have already, that we already know. So I would like to see somehow people who are younger get rewarded for trying to actually take office, because then you're going to have a problem where no one wants an office, and when they're young, and we have a problem where we're going to be 70, 80-year-olds running for office.
I have no idea what sort of race you would be talking about.
Well, on both sides.
On both sides, absolutely on both sides. Absolutely on both sides. No, it's not just a Democratic problem. It's people staying in office for maybe way too long.
Or in jobs.
No one wants to retire anymore.
As a Republican, well, or wants to or can, quite honestly. As a Republican, who would you rather face, Destiny Wells or Beth White?
Beth White all day long. I mean, talk about rowing in the same direction. I mean, there's enough, this is a gift to Todd Rokita that you're breaking the party into and dividing Indianapolis Democrats from outstate Democrats. So it bodes really well for Todd Rokita. This is a competitive, Indianapolis institutional candidate versus, a woman with a great, a younger woman with a great story and, a more appealing candidate, I think. Why you'd pick Beth White over Destiny Wells, I don't know. But I'm also picking Todd Rokita, in spite of all of my, all the times I haven't been on his page.
What does that say about you?
And I do think, though, that we're not paying attention yet to the national environment, what's happening with national Democrats. And I thought this week was like a master's class in party control, because you had these one-off congressmen talking about Biden's can't do it anymore. No one cares what the congressman you never heard of from Minnesota said. They got them all in a room and said, shut up, because if he goes down, you're going down. Yeah. And they locked it down. And then Nancy Pelosi opened the door. It's like, okay, that was to me, Democrats' credit, that was a master's class this week in getting control of the national narrative that was spinning out of control.
Destiny Wells, Beth White. I mean, I think a lot of people feel like Destiny Wells might have a better shot against Todd Rokita.
I think she does, and I think she's probably going to be the nominee. Besides that, and there's not the kind of divisive campaign that you've seen during the Republican primary between some of these opponents. They've not been attacking each other. They're both running for the race.
I mean, one's on television.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even, and I'll say that because I'll say I don't think Micah Beckwith and Julie McGuire they weren't attacking each other.
No, I'm not talking about the gubernatorial races and the congressional races. You don't have that kind of animosity here, and there isn't a lock on the Marion County delegation by any means.
Well, sure, they know Beth White. Of course they're not locked in for Beth White.
Certainly helps. All right. Finally, a new state's tourism-sponsored study of the April eclipse shows an economic impact of more than $145 million to Indiana and more than 3.5 million tourists for the event, but that most of those tourists were just Hoosiers moving around the state. Ann DeLaney, do you still count yourself as a tourist when you're going around Indiana?
You got to give spin control to the agency. I mean, for crying out loud, we went maybe 3/4 of a mile to the neighbors of my son that had a little rise in their house and watched it there. No, I don't count myself
I don't
as a
think
tourist.
they were. I think the study counted as if you went more than 50 miles.
Oh, okay.
I think that's technically how they counted you as a tourist.
Okay.
So
if I go to Holiday World.
Right. If you go to Holiday World, you're a tourist.
Okay. Okay.
Should you be counted as a tourist if you're just staying in the state?
I kind of agree with that. I think that like when I'm in my little neighborhood in Indianapolis, like I go to the same like 3 places and I spend my money there. So like when I'm, driving across the state to go visit like a state park or something like that, like I'm supporting local businesses that I wouldn't have, like a restaurant I wouldn't have tried, gas station I wouldn't have stopped at, like et cetera, et cetera. And I mean,
look at the resources.
That counts for something.
Yeah, the destinations we have here. I mean, we have a national park in the dunes. We got French Lick. We have places that I want to go in Indiana. Great golf course.
No, there's no question about that. And if you're going and you're staying overnight at a resort or something else, yes, you could be counted as a tourist. I'm not sure that driving
up to
25
Fort Wayne and
miles
come back
counts.
Well,
but
when I go
give them,
shopping in
I give them
Edinburgh
credit.
and stay at a hotel, then I'm a tourist.
Yeah.
There you go.
I don't know. I think a day trip.
Oh, yeah.
You think a day trip counts?
I think a day trip counts.
Yes.
All right.
Okay, well, there you go.
Then you were counted in this study. That's Indiana Week in Review for this week. Our panel is Democrat Ann DeLaney, Republican Mike O'Brien, Oseye Boyd of Mirror Indy, and Leslie Bonilla Muñiz of the Indiana Capital Chronicle. You can find Indiana Week in Review's podcast and episodes at wfyi.org/IWIR or on the PBS app. I'm Brandon Smith of Indiana Public Broadcasting. Join us next time, because a lot can happen in an Indiana week.
The opinions expressed are solely those of the panelists. Indiana Week in Review is a WFYI production in association with Indiana's public broadcasting stations.